Peace and blessings. Welcome back to another episode of Exodus Radio. My name is RJ Mahdi, and right now I'm actually on the road. I'm about 4 hours outside Dakar. We are in Medina Bay, Kaolack, the city of our spiritual father, for the Gamal Maulud, a huge annual event that's held here every year. So as you can see, I'm not in my normal environment. But today we're going to have a special show. Today we're talking about the Indigenous versus African debate. As of late, there's a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different, histories being told. We've taken the time to break down some of those different perspectives. I think it's important to lay out right here at the beginning of the show. We're not here to deny anybody their ancestry. If there's anybody who knows their history, heritage, we are here to pretty much bring just some understanding to those of us who've been hearing conflicting accounts. Also, to those of us who are still seeking for our histories, we intend to break some of that down today. We're going to have some guests join us today. In addition to my usual co-hosts, Sista Yaa, Chief Foday, we're also going to have Gina Ifoe, the African superstar, on today. We're also going to be visited by a sister who is relocating to the Gambia right now, building a library here on the ground. We're also going to talk to some folks with some scholarly accounts who are going to bring some details into our Indigenous versus African conversation. So make sure you guys tune in for this whole program. It's going to get really good. One thing I want everybody to do on today's show is drop in the comments below where you're from or where you're based at. And if you know your ancestry, if you know your heritage, if you know where your family is from, go ahead and drop that in the comments. We'd love to see it. We're going to talk about how different parts of the world were affected by the migrations of Black African people. We're going to talk about where do the indigenous peoples come from. A lot of us kind of stop at the word indigenous, and we don't really look behind that word to see where did our folks come from before they inhabited certain parts of the planet. So welcome again to another episode of Exodus Radio. I'm RJ Mahdi. I've got my illustrious co-host with me, Sista Yaa in Ghana. She's outside chilling, got the fan. What's going on, sister?
Oh, bro, all is well. All is well. I'm over here. This is going to be an interesting topic, and I know everybody got something to say. So let me say, I'm Team Africa. Team Africa. Okay.
we definitely are Team Africa, and being here on the continent, guys, you get to see a lot of things and get to hear a lot of perspectives and understand a lot of information that is not always that clear or readily available to us in the West. I'm not gonna lie. When I was, in my younger years in Atlanta and inner cities of the U.S., I didn't always have this kind of information available to me. It wasn't until I started to travel and actually seek out certain answers that I found them. So as we're based on the continent, me here in Senegal, Sista Yaa is in Ghana. Again, we're going to be joined by our brother Foday, who's in Sierra Leone with his wife. But from here on the ground, we have a perspective that perhaps not many people have where else they are around the world. And obviously because in those different societies, information is suppressed. And then also it's confused, right? So a lot of times we have to get back to the source. So that's what we're going to do on today's show. We got some folks checking in already from the Commonwealth of Dominica. WI. What's WI? West Indies. Okay,
Wisconsin?
Dominica, West Indies.
Oh, West Indies. Oh, okay.
West Indies. Right? I'm not living in Clayton, North Carolina. That's like, man, I didn't recognize that one. So yeah, you guys drop in the comments where you're from, where you're based at. If you know your family's ancestry, if you've done your ancestry already, go ahead and drop that for us in the comments as well. All right. So on today's show, what we're breaking down is obviously we hear a lot of people going through this whole Indigenous versus African debate, right? Some of us are, welcoming and reclaiming our African heritage. Others of us are embracing the fact that their families may have been in the Americas before Christopher Columbus and the Europeans came around, and before even slavery. I think one of the things that we want to clear up today is, are those indigenous people in America also Africans, or are they not Africans? And so that's really where this debate lies. There's no debate about the fact that Black people were in the Americas before Columbus, right? We have no argument there.
None.
Right?
None
We
whatsoever.
know Columbus wasn't the first to touch that land. We know he ain't have no business laying claim to it. And we know our people were there first. We do know that. We do also know that our people were traveling and migrating for thousands of years prior to the slave trade. What we're going to attempt to do today is break down some of the specific lineages of the different groups. Some folks are claiming the Turtle Islands. Some folks are saying they're, from, the indigenous Eskimo Mongoloid peoples. Some people are saying they're from the Moors, and we traveled for thousands of years, and I've never been to Africa, right? So we want to try and break down those different groups. And of course, we cannot ever say that all of us are the same, okay? So this is important to remember, right? We're not all, we lined up 100 Black Americans, right? A portion of them are going to be some form of indigenous. A portion of them are going to be descendants of slaves in Africa. A portion of them are going to be some Moorish background, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to get out of, number one, the mentality of telling each other we're all the same. You're a Moor, I'm a Moor, you're an Aborigine, we're not all the same, right? We've got different lineages, different mixes. But I think one thing we can bring them all to is the African continent. What do you think, Sista Yaa?
Absolutely. I mean, a Sankoi from Botswana in South Africa is not the same as somebody Turek from Mali. They're not the same. You know what I'm saying? Or they're not the same as Yoruba, or somebody from Benin. They're not the same, but they are still all African people. They're not the same. They're different. Africa is not one phenotype, and it's definitely not one ethnic group. It's a combination of a lot of different ethnicities, right? We're all Black people, but different ethnic groups. So, but the issue that I have with the deniers that the slave trade happened, and the deniers that they are, of African roots. I agree with you 100%. I think it's pretty much an established fact that Africans had been coming here long before Christopher Columbus. I think Runoko Rashidi in his work has documented the African presence all over the world. I don't think there is anywhere on this planet that was not initially populated by people who migrated out of Africa and populated the planet. So, I just get a little, first of all, the deniers of the slave trade, that's my pet peeve right there. For you to deny what our people went through, when those of us, we see with our eyes. I've been to these dungeons, in the Caribbean and here in Africa. I've talked to African people. It would be almost, if the Africans weren't saying it happened, if they were denying, but they are saying, okay, some of my people were taken. You know what I'm saying? And this is passed down through generations, the tales of their relatives who were taken, who were lost doing this, our Ma'afa. So for people to say it never happened, it makes me think, do you really hate your African self that much for you to come up with something so ridiculous as to say that it never happened? And the reason that they give is, where are those slave ships now? Okay, first of all, it's nonsense. You know what I'm saying?
That's got to be the worst. That's got to be the worst
argument ever. It's the worst argument ever. So you know, it was made of wood. Wood doesn't last forever, you know what I'm saying? And besides that, when they were done or decommissioned, it wasn't used anymore. You recycle that wood that was left over into other things. You know what I'm saying?
Just think about the fact that there's somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 ships and airplanes at the bottom of the ocean around the Bermuda Triangle.
Right.
That have yet to be recovered, that have yet to be found, that have yet to be, you know, brought back to life. So we know that ships can go on there anytime.
Along the coast of West Africa, there are ships, you know, with where human cargo lost their lives at the bottom of the sea, and people know that those ships are there. You know, some of them are. There are people who their life is to go and search these ships, and they go down there with cameras, and they're there. You know,
right. That's right. In fact, there's one right next to Gorée Island. I don't know if anybody's been to Gorée Island, Senegal, where the Door of No Return is at the slave castles there. But just off of Gorée Island, there is a sunken ship. So when you approach Gorée Island on a boat, the boat has to go past the island and circle back around in order to not interfere with that sunken ship that's sitting right off the coast. So even right there, right next to the slave castle, there is literally a ship sunken right in the water, you know, that's still there, that people can see and touch. And when you go around it on the ferry, you can even see part of it if the water is clear enough that day. But these are the kind of things that are happening on both sides of the ocean, right? These slave castles don't just exist in Senegal. If you go to Tybee Island, just off Savannah, Georgia, right? There are whole slave castles right there. Right there. Go to Tybee Island, Georgia. I'm from Atlanta. I've been there plenty of times. Go to Tybee Island, Georgia. Right off the coast of Savannah, there are whole slave castles. Whole big castles with slave bunkers, and they still got the chains in them. They still got some of the cells intact. You can go in these places and see very well what happened there. And in the case of Gorée Island, when I finally went to Gorée, I didn't want to go for several years when I first got here. But when I did go, nobody had to tell me what happened in Gorée Island slave dungeons. When you walk in the door, you feel the energy.
Yeah.
When you get off that boat on Gorée Island, before anybody tells you any of the history, any of the stories, whatever might put something in you after, no, you feel it. You feel the energy of your ancestors telling you, this is where we perished. This is where we were kept. This is where we were starved. This is where we were, you know,
had to live in our feces and utterly waste, and were raped and converted. You know, the conversion started at the dungeons here. You know, here in Ghana, they have the church. This is how diabolical these people were. They would have our ancestors enslaved and packed up in these rooms, and you know, with one window for air just stacked upon each other, and then above that, they would have a church. For air be this big. Yeah. And up above that, they would have a church. And, you know, you go through there and they tell you how the governor of the place would come down and pick somebody that he was going to be raping. You know what I'm saying? They would hose them down with water and then bring them to his chambers to rape men, women, and children, not just women. And this is another thing. I know a lot of men don't like to hear it, but the European is a homosexual, and they wasn't just raping women. Okay, it was raping men too. So okay,
yeah, it was all of us.
Now, yeah, exactly. And
not
these
even adults, we're talking children.
Yeah, and these dungeons are in South America. They're in Brazil. They're here in Africa. They're in the Caribbean. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. The slave post, a lot of places where they will auction them off. Those places still exist. And then let's go to some more evidence that other than those physical places that exist, let's go and talk about the, there are communities where people would go and build communities on the water because they were escaping, they were hiding, they would go up into the mountains they are still there. And they told you they came up there to hide from the slave raiders, from the slave catchers, and they've just been there for a while. You know what I'm saying?
Crazy.
They just really made a new life. And those people are still in those places, and they tell you how they got there. It was to escape and hide from the slave raiders and the slave catchers. That's one thing. Then how do you explain that there are people in the Caribbean and in South America who still speak indigenous African language if there is no African connection? Explain that.
Until now.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm gonna play a couple videos throughout today's show. Just some specific content that people themselves made about their own heritage. And this is where I think it's really important that our brothers and sisters can kind of find some balance, because again, a lot of us, in particular, those of us who feel as if we're indigenous, or those of us in the Moorish category, feel like we should tell all of us that we are that. And it's, it doesn't make sense for you, just because you've traced your heritage to Moorish, America or indigenous, etc., that you should be able to say that all Black people are that, because we're not. The only thing that we can all claim is Africa. Okay, and if you deny or refute the fact that you originated in Africa, we can't even have an intelligent discussion, right? Because that part is scientifically proven. That part is historically proven, archaeologically, anthropologically proven. We're not debating about that, right? The only debate here is, when did you arrive in the West? All right. So that's what we really want to get to the bottom of. If you tell me my family is indigenous, we're Moors, my first question to you is going to be, when did you arrive in America, and from where did you come? Okay, because none of us originated there. All right.
So this whole Pangea, this whole we were there doing Pangea. So you can't even have a real conversation with people that say these type of things.
You know what? Pangea has to be the most ridiculous reasoning I've been given for this thing. I swear to God, I be thinking I'm talking to, educated, intelligent people, until they say something to me like, "Oh, we got on America before Pangea." Pangea was 150 to 300 million years ago, people. All right, this was before the dinosaurs. This was before Ice Age. Okay. People did not float with Pangea. All right. So let's go ahead and get that out of everybody's system. We did not float from Africa on America as a part of the Pangea supercontinent breaking apart. That was millions and millions and millions of years before any proof of human life existed on this planet. All right. Let's go ahead and get that out the way. Chief Foday, what's going on, big brother?
Yeah. Greetings, man. What's going on? I heard y'all warming it up.
Man, look, we gotta take this to bring this to a head. We gotta actually, talk to these folks and really break down the real science of migration. I think that a lot of times what we think about is, we're sometimes our thinking is kind of small, right? We're not thinking about, number one, the amount of time that passed between these migrations, right? We're talking sometimes thousands and thousands of years, right? We can't even fathom that time frame sometimes. We think that's like, our lifetime years, right? We're talking about millenniums, right? And so when we talk about millenniums, number one thing that you have to consider is generations, right? So if in 10 generations you got 4,000 ancestors, how many ancestors do you think you have in 10,000 years?
And how many of them? And how many of them were born, raised, and buried in Africa?
Right.
That's the key question, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about ancestry.
Grandparents and great grandparents that you had that mated with an African, that mixed with Africans, that lived among Africans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. We're not just talking about your family today or who you can remember in the past century. Right. We're not talking about your great grandmother who told you that you were Indian and not African, because even that great grandmother was not around 5,000 years ago, right? 10,000 years when to
know where her ancestors came from.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And even though
and you know
most
what?
of your family on that side may still resemble those particular indigenous people, how many other bloodlines have now mixed? And if your skin is as dark as the three of us on this panel, how did it get that way?
Well, you know what, brother? Let me tell you, right? It's a matter of identity and how people identify. You know, for me, racially, in terms of our phenotype, as it relates to our continent of origin, those of us who consider ourselves Africans today would say, well, we got 95, 97% of our ancestry on the continent.
Right.
No matter how long we've been in America or in Jamaica or England, how many ancestors you got buried in America versus how many you got buried in Africa?
Right.
You understand?
Right.
And so, I mean, just if we want to claim an ancestry based on ancestry, well, what race do you belong to? What continent would you have more of your ancestors on? Some people will have more of their ancestors in Asia, and we would call them Asian people. Some will have more of their ancestry in Europe, and we would call them European people. And it's the same way. But in America, we get it twisted because, you know, I don't know what it is about this pseudo generation, man. They're taking information.
Well, I know what it is.
They're taking information and reforming it and turning it into daggers,
it's two
basically.
things. We can really sum up the whole confusion to, number one, African people in America being so ashamed of their African heritage that they don't want to claim it.
Right.
Okay?
But let me ask you this.
Let me ask you this. First, let me give you a reason, right? In the Reconstruction, when Native Americans or Indian people were getting certain benefits, etc., to go out and have their reservations, etc., there were a lot of Black people who snuck into those communities. And at that time, because things were not so good for Black people, especially coming out of slavery, etc., there were a lot of Black African families that snuck into Native communities, and those elder Black Africans would tell the children exactly what you hear them tell their kids today. You're not African, you're indigenous. Don't let nobody call you an African because they might enslave you. You better tell them you native. You better tell them you're indigenous.
But let me correct this for you. You have 5 civilized indigenous Native American nations. 5. That the white man said these people are civilized. One of the reasons why they said they civilized is because they was allies. Another reason is because they intermarried with the whites. They took Christianity. And the last reason is because they held slaves. We didn't have to sneak inside their nations. They enslaved us too. And then you gotta realize that those 5 nations that went to Oklahoma, they sided with the Confederates in the Civil War. They liberated us after the United States of America. And then they labeled the Black one freedmen. And so they'll recognize you as a freedman descendant, but you don't have status in their tribe. So right now, what you have is the Cherokee people right now. They have a freedman, a Black sister who is now one of their first leaders ever. So this struggle that you have with African people claiming a right within an indigenous nation, it largely comes because their ancestor was enslaved by indigenous people, and they were enslaved by the United States American people. Them Native American nations are sovereign. They're different than the United States of America. They didn't have to they had to come back later and then sign a treaty with the United States of America to let their slaves free. So we got to understand the history here. It's almost like us identifying with the white slave master on the same basis.
Right.
You understand? Okay. If you check, there's probably more European slave master blood in us than Native American, but we can't lie and act like we were not enslaved to them too. Now show where we enslaved them. Show where African people who were took there by their force enslaved indigenous Native American people. You won't find it, but you will find African people who were mixed with indigenous bloodlines all throughout, from Crispus Attucks on up, because we had that fraternity. Then you got to understand that they were enslaving indigenous people before they even started bringing Africans as wholesale chattel.
Yeah,
so they had
that's
a
true.
whole indigenous slave
True.
trade that happened. And
True.
some of them ended up with us, especially back then. And you can't say that we don't have some of that blood there. We can prove it.
yeah.
But some of that blood is not enough to wipe away all
The
them African ancestors
No, that
and all
African
that
blood is
African
always
history.
going to overtake whatever else is in that system.
Exactly.
And
So that's what they're trying to do.
Because all of the other races, all of these other ethnicities are watered down versions of African. Let me give you an example. If you take a cup of milk, right? You take a cup of milk and you put chocolate in it, that whole cup of milk turning brown, it's turning chocolate, right? And it don't matter, you understand what I'm saying? It don't matter how much milk is in the cup. If you add that drop of black, it's turning black. And so now what we have today is a bunch of other watered down cultures that are remixing with black, and white people included. White people included. A lot of folks out there claiming they got Indian heritage. Really, in fact, they mix with white people. That's really the truth.
Hey, let me tell you something. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up. So in my family, you see my high cheekbones, right? So in my family, and then my family, they have what's called coolie hair. In West Indian, y'all know coolie hair, right?
Right.
It's a derogatory term for Indian hair, like the slick black hair. Okay. Okay. So in my family, particularly on my grandmother's side and my grandfather's side, they came from Mississippi. But anyway, they had this story about my great grandmother's father. My mother and them knew him when they were a little girl, and they were convinced he was Indian. They were convinced he was Native American. You know why? They said because he had hair down his back, this long black hair, straight hair, and he had these Native American features, the high cheekbone and all this stuff. They were convinced. But my auntie just did our DNA. There's no Native American. There's some Irish up in there.
You see?
That's not the only one. I've been hearing that a lot. A lot of people who thought they had Native
There's no Native American anywhere.
Ran their ancestry and found out they was African and European. Folks who literally been raised, people been telling them, oh, you Cherokee, you this, you that. When ran their ancestry, it came up part Benin, came up part Nigeria, came up part Irish.
Hey, bro, you know what's crazy?
You know what I'm saying?
Hey, you know what's crazy, right? Like right now in the African world, there's a lot of Africans who leave Africa, and when they go to the diaspora, they intermarry. They marry with whites. They marry with non-Africans most of the time, in fact. I wonder how they view their children. Would they view them like we would view ours? Or is it like, no, these are my little African child. I know they have cats, but this is African. We be tripping. And really, a lot of that tripping be trauma. We don't understand that an African is an African, like you just said. You take a little bit of speck and put it in some white milk. It's chocolate, no matter what. Even if it's a little bit, you don't change it. You understand? Now, the thing is that the one drop rule in America was not universal all around the world.
Right.
It was not universal all around the world.
And I don't subscribe to the one drop rule.
Trauma from. Some people, especially in the Caribbean, when you see a half caste, they put them somewhere else. The mixed race is not necessarily the same. And it's because that's how it was in the Caribbean. But where we from, we had to accept anything, anybody, the master's picking, his children had to be right among ours. And so it was that matters to me, man, because when we're talking about race, we're talking about African, are we talking about the continent and the indigenous people of Africa? Or are we talking about racial features? Because
phenotype.
Because at this time, let me tell you, a lot of people don't know why Marcus Garvey used the word Negro. Even though he said Africa for Africans, he said the universal Negro. It was a reason. It was because he realized that we were under racial oppression and that the European had scientifically defined or created something called race. And that he said the people from Africa belong to the Negro race. And Garvey realized that everyone in Africa was not a Negro.
That's right.
So he couldn't just say Africa because it might include the non-Negroes in Africa. But when you say Negro, you're talking about people that look like us with our phenotype all around the world.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the idea of race first.
I have friends, and I think a lot of you all have seen this with some celebrities like Eartha Kitt. And Muhammad Ali has a grandson that does not look black at all. He looks like a white kid, a white boy. He's a boxer too. That boy does not look. If you didn't know, if he didn't say that Muhammad Ali, you know, one of Muhammad Ali's daughters had a child with a white man, and the boy don't look black at all. Now, I have a good friend of mine, love her to death. Her mother is Jamaican, her father is a German man. She's half caste. Well, she married a white boy, and now she got 2 kids that are, as far as I'm concerned, they're more white than black. They are more white than black. You understand what I'm saying? But they don't look black at all. If you saw these kids, now their grandmother is black. Their grandmother is a black Jamaican woman. Okay? But her grandkids look like little regular white kids. Ain't got a little curl in their hair, nothing, just straight hair, white skin. You know what I'm saying? To me, genetically,
you'd be surprised how many of them white women had our kids back during slavery time.
Huh?
I said you'd be surprised how many of those white women was having our babies back during slavery time.
Oh yeah,
you know, they was. No,
I wouldn't be surprised. But when it comes to phenotype, now while their mitochondrial DNA clearly is going to go somewhere in Africa because it will come from their grandmother and her mother before her. But just looking at them, their phenotype, these are not black people. You understand what I'm saying?
But you know what? But you know what? That's crazy. That's why I said it's contextual. Because you might have a light-skinned person that might be red bone to us in America, but be dark-skinned in Puerto Rico. You know, like I grew up around Puerto Ricans.
And really all of that.
I grew up around Puerto Ricans, my complexion, and I grew up with Puerto Ricans that was damn near white. You understand?
What that boils down to is
they be related. They be one family.
Varieties that make up all of us, because we are all very different varieties. And so when we look at even just the 3 of us here, right? Chief Foday, you know, you're Gullah Geechee, and this is one of the things I also want to point out also in today's because a lot of people ask about, you know, the Indigenous Australians, the Polynesian, Melanesians, etc. Why are they black, etc. It really boils down to 2 things: how recent your ancestors migrated out of the continent, right? And number 2 is what mixes they spent time with outside the continent. So let me give you an example. When those Africans that traveled across Asia and mixed with those Siberian Caucasoids in the north of Russia and China, right? Those people had been outside the continent for 70,000 years, number 1. And number 2, they were now mixing with a watered down gene pool, right? So which is why the Eskimos and the natives that crossed that way were light. But as you see, the ones that went south, right, when they came out of Africa, they crossed across the Middle East, those ones that didn't get all the way into China, but they went south somewhere around India, Malaysia, Singapore, those people are still dark skinned. Those are the people that populated Melanesia, the Southern Pacific, those islands, Australia, etc. Those people are still dark. They're still dark because number 1, they got to where they are more recent outside of the continent, and number 2, they didn't have to mix with white Siberians. They didn't have to mix with these different population groups, so they're still black. Many of those Polynesian islands you go down, those people are black. Yes, those people did also travel across the ocean, Central and South America, but there's little proof that they traveled across the ocean in sizable numbers enough to affect a population. All right, this is important to understand.
Let me ask you a question. Is there any proof that they didn't?
that they didn't travel in sizable enough
proportions.
waves.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
scientifically, what they say is those people had they were trading for a while, right? So they did do, they would go back and forth, trade goods. They even had some similar languages that started to form because they were trading. But what science tells us, and obviously we can only go off of science, but what science tells us that there was never a sizable migration at that point. There wasn't like hundreds of thousands. Like for instance, like how
I would say
Abu
the
Bakr
proof is
crossing
the
the
proof
Atlantic,
is
3,000 boats with 100 people per boat is 300,000 people. Now that is a sizable migration that can affect the race of a place.
If you go back,
but I would say that the proof of Chief Foday would be they have collected DNA from all over the world, so there would be proof if that were true that they had come in sizable numbers.
They actually have collected DNA from that region. They say that those Polynesians mostly have like a Taiwanese kind of DNA. They have found it in Central America, kind of like from where Mexico's Aztec country is on down. But what they say is there is very little hint of that DNA in North America, as in what we now call America, right? So there were some natives that may have mixed, but it was a very, very small population. That DNA never entered the U.S. gene pool.
So you had two different migrations.
DNAs did.
You had two migrations. One coming across the Pacific, one coming across the Bering Strait. That's what you're saying. Two Asian migrations.
Right. You said, go ahead, say it again.
I said, are you saying like there was two migrations from Asia into America? One across the north and one across the water, the islands.
Right. So so actually the one from the islands, I would not call that a migration. I would not call that based on my own research, I would not. The one that came from Polynesia to the west coast of America.
How long ago was this supposed to happen? You know the timeline for it? Because the reason why I'm asking is because the reason why I'm asking is every 10 generations, you get over 4,000 ancestors.
Right.
So I'm asking timeline because if you got 30 people that end up in America, what would they be in 5,000 years?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Now imagine being hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, because listen,
right?
In 1860, they said there were 4.5 million Africans in the United States. 4 million enslaved, 500,000 free, right? Today they say we're almost 50 million. We definitely more than 45 million. That is about 150 years, bro. And we're talking about a 10 from 4.5 to 45. So I'm asking time frame. How long was these people coming to America, even in small droves? Because what I understand about migration and multiplication, especially when you're talking about how many grandparents we have 10 generations back. Wow, it's possible to have significant populations from small populations, given enough time. I say that because not that that's my belief, but I'm throwing it out there as a devil's advocate because this is people's argument. For one, you have people like Wanuka Rashidi, the late Baba, who went all around them parts over there, telling us these are Africans, these are Negroids, these are our people. Their ancestors are the same as ours. They come from the same Africa as us. Some of them don't know it, but they black, just like The Rock. You know, the guy The Rock. The wrestler, you know what I'm saying? They got it in them Polynesians, they got something in them. We know that. So either we're going to recognize them people there as Africans, or we're not. If we recognize them as Africans and we say, well, enough of them came, or there was some migration or some trade, you know, they can do DNA, find some of them in certain places. Well, that DNA will dictate that there was people looking like them as well. That there was people probably of a darker complexion than, you know, the Eskimos. People of more Africoid features, hair than, you know, Eskimos, maybe even a more Africanized Southern culture than an Eskimo. You understand? And so, of course, they would be considered darker than an Eskimo. They would be the darker ones. Even if you take the Northern Asians and you take the Southeast Asians and you look at them genetically, look at them phenotypes, they don't look the same. So this is the thing I'm asking. Are they Africans when they're in Australia, but they're not Africans when they reach America thousands of years ago? If they reached America 3,000 years ago, they wasn't Africans when they reached?
Yeah.
Today,
so you're basically asking when did they stop being Africans? They were Africans
absolutely.
when they came. At one point, did they stop being Africans?
This is my question.
I understand. I say they will have some African ancestry, but they no longer have an African phenotype. Like for me, I clearly still possess an African phenotype after generations of being in the United States. It's obvious because Nigerian people claim me up and down every time they see me. Hey, you look like my people. You look like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And me, even when I look at the particular, I say the Igbo. When I look at the Igbo, they look like my family. They look like, if I were to start bringing my family members on here, you'd be like, these are Igbo people. You understand what I'm saying? Just based on the way we look. You understand? I haven't confirmed that with a DNA test, but I'm saying I use my own eyeballs. My eyeballs tell me that I look like those people.
You know your family.
You understand?
You know your own features. Yeah, you know your family. I get what you're saying. In terms of that, now that's a question to me, because if you know about J.A. Rogers, he wrote the book about race, what was it, sex, race, and something like that. This has been an ongoing question. You know, when does an African stop being an African? You know, how mixed do you have to be? And when you look, and since we're talking about Native Americans today, they have their own systems. Every single one of them tribes are considered nations. They have their particular status. They have the particular land. They got the particular leadership. And they also have the particular requirements to determine who can claim to be a descendant and who cannot. Who can claim to be a citizen and who has full rights and who does not. So they have their own sovereignty. That's one thing to understand, is that even while we're on the outside looking like these Negroes, Africans, talking about, you know, people that look like us trying to be like them, the reality is that they still have a way that they determine. Like, I think it's like 1/16 for most tribes. If you ain't 1/16 them, you can't claim nothing, and you got to be able to prove that. And that's what they say, not what I say. That's what they prove it. Prove that you 1/16 us, and then you can come in our nation. That's how they rock.
Chief, how much credibility? I know we have the DNA test now, but how much credibility do we give? You know, like I know, in Africa, African people look at you. They look at your statue. They look at your body build. They look at your face, and they can tell you belong to these people. That, you know. So do we not give that any credence whatsoever?
Well,
I think we should.
Well,
I think we should.
For me, I give it credibility because it happened to me so many times. At one time, I had to go to Guinea Conakry. It was during Ebola time. They were about to lock this country down, and I was like, man, I'm going to Guinea. You know, they was more open. When I got to the border, they was like, you're from Mali. You're from Mali. They said you're a Malian mercenary. I'm like, no, I'm not, man. I'm a damn American. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, let me through, man. What you talking about?
A mercenary.
They was looking at me and was like, yo, you're a Malian mercenary. I'm like, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? And these were soldiers that was looking at me and immediately putting me in the Mandingo warrior class. And so I was like, yo, it's crazy. I went to meet the Minister of Trade and Tourism. Trade and Industry here. Sitting down talking to him, and I introduced myself, but later on I said, yeah, well, you know, I'm of Mandingo ancestry. He was like, man, you ain't got to tell me that. He changed on me. He was like, man, anybody who sees you knows that. Anyone who knows what the old Mandingo look like know that you look just like that. You know what I'm saying? So he's like, you ain't got, the blood don't lie. You're gonna look a certain way. I think it's real. You know what? Dr. John Henrik Clark, when he spent his time in Ghana, he said his nose gave him away. He said his little pudgy nose gave him away that he was related to the Iwi. He was like, the Iwi got these little pudgy noses, and everyone that would see him would say, you're Iwi, you're Iwi, you're Iwi. They would point him out by his nose. This Dr. John Henrik Clark. You see, so You got to give it some credence. You would know your child if you seen it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Sometimes I meet cousins that I don't know, but I see the common traits instantly.
Yeah. Listen, when I was born, my mother tells me this story. My mother was 17 when she had me, and my grandmother, my father's mother came to, I was born in the house. I would have midwife. My father's mother came to look at me. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
My mother said she looked at me as a newborn baby and said, "Yep, that's one of mine." Just as a newborn baby. Yeah, my paternal grandmother, my father's mother, came to look at me, her with my grandfather, my dad's dad, and the family. They came to look at me, and they looked at me and say, that's one of ours.
You know what? That's something that we held in our hands until integration, childbirthing. We held that in our hands. It wasn't the white woman didn't break her sweat giving birth to the black woman child. Bringing her child to life, bringing her through. No, we midwifed our own babies all the way up until they start letting us in their hospitals. Then we start aborting our babies. Then we start clipping our ovaries and clipping our nuts and all that stuff. Once we got integrated into their hospitals, they started attacking us and our reproductive systems. Before that, we held that. That's why our grandmoms had 10 babies, 15 babies, lived 90 years. Now you lucky if you get up to that 10 baby, this or that. Our ancestors seen that as a blessing. A woman with 10 babies now is seen as a cursed woman. You know what I'm saying? Based on our values. Our values have been completely transformed. My mother could tell her children and grandchildren because of the location of our green spots. We always have, all of our babies have green spots. They have it right above their buttocks. Usually it might take one cheek and leave the other cheek open. And you see it over and over and over. You say, oh man, look, you got the green butt cheek. That's my boy right there. And we don't need nothing. We don't need nobody to tell us nothing. We can look at the eyes, the deep eye socket. Okay, that's people's. We can look at the head shape. Yeah. People sleep on the head shape.
Yeah.
All that matters. Yeah.
I had a cousin, I have a cousin on my maternal side. She just had a baby. And it was like, soon as she posted pictures of the baby, that clearly was one of our babies. Clearly. It was like, no, that you can look at the baby and tell that baby belonged to my family. You see what I'm saying? It was clearly. Can't nobody can't switch out no baby on us. We know it. So when I saw the baby looked just like my people. You understand? So I think that they are able to look at us and tell. And I think that should be given just as much credibility as the DNA. The DNA doesn't tell you all, like we've already clarified. The DNA can only tell you about one ancestor on your mama's side, one on your dad.
It tell you about one aspect of it. You don't tell you everything. Let me tell you, right? Yeah. When I grew up, when I was growing up, I had some friends, my best friends. They're twin brothers. They look just like their father, but they're twins. And their father used to be like, man, y'all got to watch y'all back. These police hate me out here. When they see you, they're going to see me. He said, when you hang with them and they see them, they're going to see you hanging with me. Even if I'm dead in the box, when they see their face, they're going to see me. And I guarantee that's exactly how our ancestors felt and how it really, really is. Because the same police that used to harass me in my neighborhood probably see my son today. And now they're veterans. They was rookies, harassing me. Now they're veterans today. Like, oh, I hate this guy. I know his dad. Right now today. And so I believe that the way we look is so important. But I don't want to limit what we are as Africans to the way we look, especially considering the fact that we know what has happened to us. We have to have a way of saying, okay, well, look, the Native Americans do it. They say, hey, man, look, 1/16. They put a generation on it. We have to define what it means to be an African, not culturally, biologically. What does it mean to be one of us? Yeah. And a lot of people would lose if we begin to truly identify ourselves for ourselves in our own interests, because the phenotype will be one aspect of the African identity. It wouldn't be the whole thing. A person without the phenotype could possess other aspects of the African identity and still remain an African without the Negroid phenotype. And that's what I'm saying. We really got to have these conversations. I appreciate the fact that there are people out there that put their ideals out there, because it gives us opportunity to examine them. You know, are some African Americans, do they have Native American ancestry? Absolutely. Many of us do. I don't deny that. I'd be a fool to deny that. Does that make them Native Americans? I don't know. Check their tribe and see what their requirements are. And if they are, then tell them to go get their nationality and stop bugging us about being African.
Right.
You understand? So,
let me be African. Let me be proudly African.
Yeah.
I don't know why people keep. Yeah. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, go get your nationality. You know, you got it. You got sovereignty status. U.S. government give you reparations. You all right.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know, another thing, I know we got some guests that need to come on here, but I just want to say this.
Right.
We can also prove that the transmigration, the moving, the transnavigating the globe. Okay, we know that the oldest pyramids in the world are out of Nubia, okay, out of Sudan. All right, so that technology, that how to make a pyramid, you know, they took that technology to Egypt, and they also took that technology, that information outside of Africa to China. There are pyramids in China. How many people know that? There are pyramids in China. They took that technology to North. They took that to North America. There are pyramids. They have some of the old mound ones, but if you go to South America, there are pyramids. Our people went there and taught that information and taught that technology and taught that science. There's no getting around that. So we know that we were moving around the globe and taking information and trying to civilize people. We were trying our best to civilize people. Mm-hmm. Apparently, we failed.
Right.
Yeah. I think that we've always understood that to exchange scientific information is universal. You know, it don't matter where they invent the television at. No one's saying, "Oh, a white man invented the television, we shouldn't use them." No one's saying that. No one's saying, "Oh man, the white man created this, we shouldn't drive a car." Nobody's saying that, because we understand that science is universal.
Right.
You understand? We understand that you use it, technology and science, universally. And it doesn't belong to one race or another, regardless where it starts. Right. And if we accept that today, then we got to accept that for them too. Don't mean we have to apply that to our ancestry, but we also got to have that sense of perspective looking back. Our ancestors revolutionized science. We laid the foundation. Our observation of the universe and us solving those questions, those answering those questions, is what laid the foundation for what they now call in STEAM. You know, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. You know, the rudiments of civilization, of course. But it was in our interest to go out and share that information. A lot of people now have taken the information and hold it among themselves and patent it and use it against the parts of the world that don't have access to it. This is one of the biggest problems in the world, having access to the same quality of information, same access to technology and things like that. So what I think honestly about this whole conversation, bro, is that if somebody black as me with 97% African ancestry want to be a Native American because my great-great-granddaddy in America was a Cherokee, then you should be allowed to. I should be allowed to live in my mental.
That's me.
In my mental sickness.
Just let them. I mean, I'm not at the point where I feel like as adults we should have to impose anything on anybody. But one thing that you always see, especially in our approach to, you know, Pan-Africanism, when you see our website, when you go to our media, when you see how we address each other as what? Members of the African diaspora. Okay? When we address our brothers and sisters, when we say, hey, who we're calling home, we say we're calling the diaspora home. Right? And that means people who identify with or have ancestry in Africa. If that ain't you, we ain't talking to you. If you don't
Say that.
identify with the continent, if you don't feel like you have anything in common with Africa, we're not talking to you. We're talking to those who are members of the African diaspora, because we know that over the past several thousand years, Africans have been migrating around this world, whether by slavery, whether by exploration, whether being stowed away in the bottom of ships.
Anyway.
We had a story just the other day. A girl, a sister who told us the story of her ancestors, said they came to the U.S. from Africa, stowed away in the bottom of a ship, right? So not as slaves, not as explorers, but came from Africa to the U.S. So what we're going to do real quick, because we do have a guest, so I want to bring on really quick. I don't want to keep him on too long. Sista Yaa, you want to introduce Dr. Issa, and we'll get on to the video that I have for us here in just a second.
All right, let me get to his bio. You didn't forewarn me that I would be doing the introduction. So hold on. Let me bring it up. Okay, Dr. Jahi Issa holds a PhD from Howard University in the United States in United States history and African Americana studies. His primary research is the Garvey movement, and he has published in many fields. He lives currently in the Gambia. Welcome, Dr. Jahi Issa.
Welcome, brother. Welcome. How you doing?
Hey,
Welcome,
peace,
brother,
everybody.
doctor.
How are you doing?
Dr. Issa, how you doing, brother?
All right.
Greetings.
Welcome to the show.
I see you in your car there. You are riding, or
Yeah, I'm in the car. I'm actually about to do this twice a day workout.
oh, okay. So you've been following the conversation. What do you?
Yeah. I've been on for about.
Based on your research.
Yeah, right. It's very interesting conversation. I think Sista Yaa, as we were discussing earlier, I think I have been kicked out of my family. My family, I think they kicked me out of the family because I told them that we are not Native Americans, and and are y'all still there?
Yes, yeah, we're here.
Oh, okay. I don't see anybody now. I just see myself.
Yeah, we just put you on the screen. Go ahead.
You got the floor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, about 2 months ago, me and one of my cousins was having this debate, and I told her that we were not Native Americans on my mother's mother's side, and she said, "How do you know?" I'm like, "Look at me. What do you mean? Look at your mom." What? And so I said, "Let me go ahead and do this DNA," and the DNA came back 100% from the Congo.
Wow.
Not 97, not 20, not 98.7, 100% from the Central African Republic, which was then known as the Congo, right? And from a group of people who were some of the oldest Homo sapiens in the world. I mean, they go back over 230,000 years. This is my lineage, right? And so I shared this on my family page. They kicked me out of the family page group because
they disowned you, brother.
Oh, they disowned me. Look, and because there is a lying lore in our family that we are Native Americans on my mother's side, and I said, "Well, y'all, where are you guys getting this information from?" And so they sent me the Census Bureau, and they said it does say Chickawa. I said, "Oh, the Chickawas enslaved us. They owned us. Y'all don't know that the 5 civilized tribes were allowed to go to slave ships and pick us up and buy us?"
Wow.
They were like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "The 5 civilized tribes: the Cherokees, the Chickawa, the Seminoles, the Creek, and there's another one I can't think of, right?" And they were like, "What are you?" I'm like, "Look, they owned us. That's why it says, she says on her census bureau, she was Chickasaw. That's what she was. And that's it. And they treated us horribly. They owned our people. But the beautiful thing about it is that they didn't mix with us. Why? Because that first person that was brought to the United States in the early 1850s from the Central African Republic, which then was all called the Congo, is 100%. So that group that got off of that slave ship, most of them were from that area right. of the Congo, the same ethnic group, and they stayed with each other, which makes sense on that plantation that was owned by these indigenous Asiatic groups that bought my ancestry. And so a lot of us, unlike some people, they did mate with other enslaved Africans. And you do have a lot of black people, as you guys were saying, who are mixed with indigenous people who are already here. Some of them were very dark in hue. Some of them were not. Most of the people who were dark in hue were basically wiped out in that 300-year period that predated my ancestors coming in the 1850s, right? So, yeah, and a lot of people don't know that indigenous people bought and sold African people, right? And we don't know this because we have romanticized our relationship with them. But there are numerous of studies out there that talk about it, numerous of books. Yeah, so, if I can add any value to what you're saying, I'm looking at my own DNA, 100% from the Congo, yet on the Census Bureau, my maternal great-great-grandmother, who was 100% from the Central African Republic, 100%, which means that her husband was also 100%. But that DNA maintained when I took my DNA test, I was shocked. We were blown away, my whole family. They're still dealing with this. They don't know how to deal with it. That they are not Native American in the sense of bloodline. It's like, no, we belong to that nation because we were enslaved. And then the U.S. forced them to free us. They didn't want to free us because they were not under the jurisdiction of the U.S.
Right.
Right, and they had to sign a treaty in 1866 to free all the people that they owned, and they called them freemen. And that's what happened to my family. And this is
so that do we lose them? So that that is a perfect example of how a lot of our families, especially the ones who were in America before slavery and throughout slavery, took on that Native identity a lot of times just for safety, a lot of times just to keep themselves out of the heat of being Black Africans in America. And so we understand that mentality. We know what the Underground Railroad was, right? These were thousands of African slaves breaking free in the South, fleeing to the North. But then you look above Texas and you see Oklahoma and you wonder how many of them snuck into Oklahoma instead of going the other way to Ohio or Pennsylvania, right? Or New York, right? How many of them went into Oklahoma and Arkansas where it was native territory? And if they made it into that area, can you imagine the one rule the parents would give the children while they hide out in that native territory? What would be the one rule your parents would tell you to keep you safe? Never tell nobody you're African. Never tell nobody you're Black. If anybody asks, you're an Indian, you're a Native, you're Indigenous, right? That was a coping mechanism with being African in a country that was enslaving and tormenting Africans, right? And so we find a lot of people, even now in our African American community, who know exactly that history. And so I'm going to play a brief video. This video is about 9 minutes long, and it's of a sister from the Garifuna people. All right, if anybody knows about the Garifuna people of Central America and the Caribbean, very strong-knit African tribe. But this sister is going to tell her history and break down the African in her, right? And so let's tune in for this video. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to my channel, Sophia Wishes. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos from me. Don't forget to hit that post notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post. And you can follow me on all my social medias if you would like. As you guys can see from the title, I'm going to be talking about my ethnicity. I already have an ethnicity tag, so I will link that down below. But I'm going to explain a little bit more in depth about my culture, where I come from, my people, and why I'm just so proud of who I am and where I come from. If you cannot pronounce the name that you see in the title, it is Garifuna. 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 I am Garifuna, 100%, 100%. Mis padres son de Honduras. Para ustedes, quien hablan en español, bienvenidos a mi canal, pero yo no voy a hablar en español por todo el video, perdón. Es que no sé cómo explicar todo en español. Anyways, welcome. So yeah, so that is who I am. That is my ethnic group, Garifuna. So what is a Garifuna? How come you've never heard of us? Most of y'all have never heard of what a Garifuna person is. Well, for one, we are a very small population, and for two, we're kind of like populated in different areas. So mainly New York, we're in Florida, we're in Houston, we're in California, and I believe that's about it as far as like.
Now mind you guys, all right, this sister is telling you that the majority of the population of her particular tribe exists in several of America's major cities. This is a regular black sister. If you looked at this girl, if you ran into her at the mall or on the street or in the club or wherever in school, you would think she's just a regular African American. A lot of you people on the indigenous wave might look her right in her face and tell her, no, you're not African, you're indigenous. But listen to this sister tell you her actual lineage, which is something that many of us can't do. Let's pay attention.
The clumps of Garifuna people that you will find in the US, and in Latin America, Garifuna people are located in Nicaragua, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and let me know if I'm forgetting one, because I think that's it. Basically, Garifuna, our people, were developed through ethno-genesis, which is a culture and also a language that was influenced by a multitude of different languages and cultures. Okay, let me just get to the beginning. Okay, so since I was little, very, very young, my parents have always spoken to me about our history, where we come from, who my people are, how they got to Honduras, and yeah, the rest is history. Like, I've always known who my people are, where we come from. I've always known that my specific ethnic group was not enslaved into chattel slavery. So let's start from the very beginning. I'll try to make this video not too long, so that way I can just give you guys the gist of how we came to be and who we are and why I'm here today. My ancestors were part of the triangular slave trade, the diaspora. And if you don't know any of this, first of all, no shame. It's easy to look up. You could always look it up and, you know, just learn something new. And if you ever meet a Garifuna, then you know who we are. I mean, it's so rare for me to find someone who knows who I am, or like where I come from and my people. Disclaimer, no, I cannot speak Garifuna. I'm working on it. So here's how it goes. My ancestors were taken from Africa and but specifically the region of what we call now Nigeria. And on the way to the New World, my ancestors were meant to come to the New World, which is now called what we call the United States. They were captured on the way to the New World. The boat had crashed. The ship crashed and landed in the area of St. Vincent Island, which is located in the Antilles, and that is specifically around the area of Grenada. And so it's like, you know, Caribbean area, and that's where my ancestors landed. And once the boat crashed, the slaves, my ancestors, took over, and I think they killed their capturers. That's what I was told. Killed the capturers and settled in that area of St. Vincent Island and mixed with the Arawak Indians. And so Garifuna, that's kind of how the Garifuna people became Garifuna, with the African language that they spoke, plus mixing with the Arawak Indians. The Garifuna language began to develop, the Garifuna people began to develop, and during that time is when the British and the British wanted to take the land and obviously incorporate slavery and make these people who were already there enslaved. So the Garifunas went to war with the British. The British signed a treaty, but they didn't agree with the treaty. So the Garifunas made the British sign this treaty that, you know, that they would leave them alone and in peace, and so that they wouldn't take over the land and wouldn't enslave them. So this is around like the 1600s. During that time, Sista Yaa, which is our Garifuna warrior, he was the leader during that time of war. He led the Garifuna people to fight against the British. Long story short, Sista Yaa was killed. During that time he was killed, and so because of that the French retreated, kind of like they were on the Garifuna side to help fight against the British. But after Sista Yaa was killed, pretty much that partnership was over. The French retreated and the British exiled the Garifuna. They had to go because they lost the war. So they were exiled to Roatan, which is in Honduras, which is an island that's a part of Honduras, and that's where the Garifuna people first arrived, to Roatan, and from there spread to Nicaragua, Guatemala, and that's why we are on the coast. Most Garifuna people are on the coast because that's, you know, that's where we landed. And so yeah, that's how many people came to be. And because of the mixture of the French, and Garifuna has a little bit of English, has a little bit of French, has a little bit of the Arawak language, has a little bit of the African language. That's how we developed our culture, that's how we developed our language, and that's how we are Garifunas today. Throughout the voyage, only half of us survived, so it was only about 250,000 people that survived the voyage, which is why we're such a small population of about 600,000 people, and kind of decreasing. Not necessarily that we're going extinct, but the language and the culture is not extinct, but the older generations, for like my parents for example, aren't sharing it with us, the younger generation, so it's not carrying on as it should. Garifuna people, we were influenced by the British and by the French, but we were never colonized, we were never enslaved, because we were exiled, and so we were able to preserve our culture. So once the Garifuna people were exiled to Roatan, that is what we call our settlement day, Garifuna settlement day. We don't have an Independence Day because there was never anyone to be independent from, because we've always been our own people. We've always been able to preserve our language and our culture because we were never colonized. And the indigenous people that were in Honduras were welcoming to the Garifuna people. The Garifuna people were able to work with the indigenous people of Honduras, and that is why Garifuna people all speak Spanish fluently as well. So Garifunas speak Garifuna, which is a dialect, and it is also a culture and an ethnic group and a subculture, and also speak Spanish, and they have been in Honduras since the 1700s, and that's why I'm Hispanic as well, part of the Latin American community. That's why I can speak Spanish, and yeah, that's just a little
All right. So right there we have a story, guys. And the reason that this is important is because I wanted to show people, number one, for those of us out there who are claiming that we're all indigenous, I had somebody literally tell me the other day, oh, you don't know who you are. You're more. You don't even know who my grandparents are. You don't even know where I'm from. This sister is telling you literally, I live in America. I'm American as all the rest of us, right? I look like me. We all look the same. But this sister just gave you an entire alternative history of her people, and very concisely. Not only did she start with, we were from Africa, Nigeria to be exact. We crossed the ocean, meant to be slaves, but freed ourselves in a takeover. And we, number three, mixed peacefully with the Arawak Indians. This is a sister who's telling you her history concisely. We mixed with the Indians. They were friends of ours. For hundreds of years, we lived there with them in peace. We shared the land. And now all of those people you see down in that area, Honduras, up throughout the Caribbean, they're black, right? They come to America. You look at them in the face and you would just sum them up as whatever everybody else is. But it's not that simple, because we all came from different ways, different directions, different time periods, under different circumstances, but we all trace back to the African continent. And so this is what I wanted to show, was just the diversity in ancestry, number one, because we can look the same. It doesn't mean that our path was the same, right? My parents, or my great-grandparents, could have came to America on those 3,000 ships with Mansa Musa. Your great-grandparents could have came before that, when the Moors were sailing across the ocean, right? Sista Yaa's grandparents might have came over there as slaves in the hulls of ships, right? Chief Foday's great-grandparents might have came over there as Gullah Geechee and populating the Gullah Islands, right? Just because white people found us there does not mean we always existed there. And that's the part that I can't get past. And if anybody in the comments is a FBA or whatever you guys call it, Indigenous, whatever, tell me where you came from before you got there. Because science tells us you were not always there. We were not always on that landmass, okay? Don't say Pangea. Either A, you got there through exploration on some boats, or B, you got there by foot, which would take thousands of years, like it did crossing the Bering Strait as a migration. These are the scientific ways you got there. When we look at the Olmecs and the Aztecs and the Mayans in Central America and Mexico, they were the same as Eskimos. They looked like Eskimos with a little bronzer skin because they've been in the heat. They did not encounter black skin until explorers started landing in that region some little less than couple thousand years ago, right? Around the 10th century, 9th century, they have, But what we want to point out is that nobody can say indefinitely what the full history of anybody else is, except the fact that we all originate in the same place. Okay, so I'd like to see scientific data, and I'm not just talking about y'all ranting and whatnot. We're talking about actual. I want to see scientific data that says you're indigenous to another place rather than the mother continent.
Can I also ask this question to the people who look like us Africans, who say they are not African, but you look like us? Why is it that the Native American people, the ones that we tend to identify, the more Asian looking ones, right? I'm not talking about the $5 white people looking. I'm talking about the indigenous ones, the one we see in the pictures, photographs. Why is it that these people, whether in South America or in North America, still retain something like language, okay? Songs, something. They retain something from their culture that existed before the white man came. But the black ones, even if you travel all over the world, wherever the white man went to colonize people on their own land, those people retain some part of their language, something. They can speak,
Right.
you know, some of the elders, whatever.
Yeah.
Why don't y'all? Why if the only people that I know that don't retain is the people who were removed, who were totally removed from their thing, you know, and had to adapt. You know what I'm saying? You know, even within the Gullah Geechee and stuff, there's some patois, there's some small things that people were able to. Why don't these Black Native American people have anything in terms of language?
Right.
Why don't you have a language? Where's your language? You understand? Where's the language you had before the white man came? Why is it that the Asian looking ones still have theirs and you don't have yours?
Right.
Why?
That's a very
Why
valid
is that?
question, especially for those who say that they were not enslaved. You know, because we have a lot of people who are saying that. You know, my family wasn't no slaves. You know, we were indigenous, this and that. Okay, well, show us what you held on to from your culture. And if you have nothing remaining held on to from your culture, chances are you were enslaved, number one. Chances are you didn't actually have that culture ingrained in you, right? Because if you did, it doesn't get wiped out, right? Especially when you're in the land in which it is from. This is why it's so difficult to enslave a people in the country that they're from, in the land that they're from. Because that's the land that has your language, that you know the back ways, and you know you can navigate. Your people are there. You have an advantage in terms of knowing the available resources to you, right? Your spirituality, all those things that you're in your land. That's why they can't. You've never seen a population where they just came and enslaved the whole population where they live at, or where they're from, or where they're indigenous to. That's contrary to slave science, to being, you know, to enslaving a people. So now you have to wonder, why did they move all of those natives out west? When they came and they found all of those so-called natives on the shores of North America, and then this thing called the Trail of Tears happened. Why? It happened because, like I said, you can't enslave those people, and then the only thing you can do is kill them and run them off. Right? So they tried that. They killed as many as they could. They ran as many as they could off. But where did they go to find people to replace them? Ask yourself why they went all the way back to the African continent to bring people to that land. I tell you why. Because when those white people arrived in America, not only did they bring sicknesses and all kind of disease, because that was not their indigenous area, right? It's not the environment that they're supposed to be in.
Right.
Number two, they had no idea how to grow food there, how to farm there. They had no idea how to use that land for their benefit. But the people that they found there, dark-skinned people, were doing really well with that. Dark-skinned people were doing really well with that. They found them there. Like, damn, man, y'all got cornfields like crazy. Y'all know how to do all this. Y'all planting all that, y'all, right? So we're going to kill y'all off because we can't really oppress y'all in y'all home, but we're going to go get some people that are just like y'all and bring them here and replace y'all. Yeah. Let's just use common sense, right? We're going to bring some people here that are just like y'all and use them to replace you. So that was the next wave of migration, right? Slavery wasn't where it started. And that's what I agree with when it comes to the indigenous conversation. That's the part I agree. Yes, no, you're right. We didn't start
because you come here,
slavery. That was just one of many migrations.
White people came to Africa. They colonized almost all of Africa, absent Ethiopia. And guess what? African people still speak their own language.
And still got their culture.
I don't care if they speak French. I don't care. They still speak their own language. They still have their own spiritual system. They still have it. Okay. Right. I don't care where you go. If you go to India, where British people colonized them, guess what? Indian people still have their own language. They still have their own spiritual system. They were colonized, but they still have it. And no matter where you go on this planet, you know what I'm saying? The indigenous people, they still have. But you black people who look like me, who say you are indigenous to America, you don't have nothing. You don't have nothing to prove that, oh, I've been here the whole time. Well, you know what I'm saying? I got this language. My language was here. The language alone would prove it. If it's true, where is your language? Tell me the name of it. Tell me your language. You understand what I'm saying? And explain to me why everybody else was able to keep theirs and you wasn't. And you weren't.
That's a mic drop. That's a mic drop.
As an African descendant, I know why I wasn't able to retain my name and my language, because I was removed from it. It was completely taken away. That's why I don't have mine. So explain to me why you don't have yours. Next question. Why is it? Now there's a on YouTube, and I wish I had pulled it up before now, but there was a brother from a Ghanaian tribe who through family history, oral history, knew that some of his relatives had been taken away and taken into slavery. And he went on a voyage to find the descendants, of these family members who through oral history had been taken away. Why did this man leave Africa, Ghana specifically? And I wish I had the name of it. I'll try to find it and give you the link, RJ, so you can put it in the thing when it's over. And went to a Maroon community. Though you know the Maroons, they escaped. The Maroon community is where you will find people who were able to retain their language because they weren't so influenced by the West, right? So when you go into South America and all those places in the Caribbean and you go to the Maroon communities, those people still speak their language,
just like in Jamaica.
If you you go to Colombia. Go to Colombia and find the Maroon people. They still speak African language.
That's right.
They're not speaking Native American language. They're speaking African language. Explain it. Explain it. This man traveled from Ghana and found people who in the Caribbean islands, I can't remember where it was. It's a Maroon community. I'm going to try to find that link. Who was still, he came on a boat because they were a Maroon community. So it was a community of people. You couldn't easily get to them where they are. They brought him there on a boat. And do you know these people are still speaking this Ghanaian language after centuries of being separated in Africa? Explain it. For those who are saying that slave trade never happened, I need you to explain this. They have a documentary called We Are They. Google it. We Are They. It's about some people in Cuba. They did a documentary on some people in Cuba who still practice and sing songs from, I want to say, what country is? I don't know if it was Angola or what. Just look it up. We are they. Or they are we. They are we. They found that they were able through the linguistics and through the music and through the cultural practice to find these people, where these people came from. And they took some of them from Cuba and brought them to Africa, back to where they were taken from, their ancestors were taken from. And they were able to communicate with these people. In fact, these people were still performing music and songs and dance from the original African people that they were taken from, but they held on to it in Cuba. Explain that. How do you explain it? So this is the thing that trips me out when people say it never happened. It never happened. It never happened. You sound stupid.
And I think what I'm saying. We got practical. It's always smarter to be practical than technical. Okay, and I could do both, right? I could do technical. We can get down to the science. We can start talking archaeology. Like I'm a geek like that. I'm a nerd like that. But let's just be practical. With being practical, we have to, number one, look at historical evidence that provides us with reasoning for these migrations, right? Like they say, everything has a cause. Is a cause for every effect, right? Why did people migrate? Just like the video we watched a little while with the girl, she told us, my folks came from Nigeria. They shipwrecked here. They fought for their freedom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That's her why. All of these migrations have that. All of these migrations have a why. Whether it was pre or post-slavery, whether it was from the East Coast or the West Coast, whether it was coming out of Siberia and Alaska, or whether it was bubbling in Central America. We know why those migrations happen. And so now we have to understand the simplicity of genetics. We're not even gonna go all into haplogroups and DNAs, and we can do that too, y'all. I'm a nerd. We can do that too, but we're not gonna go. Let's just go into the simplicity of genetics. You got a people who came out of ice cold, frigid temperature after spending almost 30,000 years there, living on a slab of ice, eating fish through holes in the ice, you know, wearing mammoth fur to stay warm, whatever, right? Mixing with other cold-blooded Caucasoids out of the Caucasus Mountains. What do you think those people would look like? We just talking regular, simple, right? What do you think those people would look? Do you think those people would be dark after spending 30,000 years in the cold, mixing with Siberian Caucasoids, eating raw fish? No, them folks wasn't black. There was a genetic split that happened there. And those people came out looking like exactly who they were. There's no doubt in our mind, because those people are still there today. Those people are still there today. Somebody asked me earlier today in some comments, how did those people live in Siberian cold without dying or getting hypothermia? Those people still live there today.
In Iceland,
people living in the Arctic right now, living in damn near igloos, fishing through holes in the ice, riding snowmobiles and mush dogs on sleighs, and they're still happening today. Right. And your only rebuttal is how would they have lived there in the cold? That's exactly how they lived there. They mutated. They turned into white, stringy-haired, cold temperature people. But they came south. They came down out of Alaska. They came through Canada. They came through the plains out west. And then they populated the rest of America. And this is where you have the tribes. So all of you guys who are telling me, you know, my family's Blackfoot, my family's Cherokee, my family's this or that, this is how those tribes came about. They spread throughout the country. They took their different areas. We're going to take this riverbed. We're going to take this plains. We're going to take these mountains, this area, right? That's how the nations began. And as they travel further south, and again, this is archaeology. You can go online right now and look up the footprints that they uncovered, I think, through the Mojave Desert in New Mexico. Thousands of footprints that migrated across that desert some 12, 15,000 years ago. All right, and this is archaeology. You can't argue with this. They got the footprints literally buried in the desert, hardened, fossilized footprints of thousands of people marching across that desert, north to south, in the exact same direction that we're telling you, from Alaska down to Mexico. All right. And when they got into Mexico around the same time period, and again, these timestamps, you can add them all up, right? When they got into Mexico, we can see exactly how long it took them to set up the Mayan Empire, the Aztec Empire, the Olmecs. All of these things are literally chronologically detailed and documented, okay? And that's why those Central American people still look like those same Eskimos from up in the north. If you can pull up, you can go and look right now at an indigenous Mexican. Just look up on Google. I'm not talking about the white ones that are all Spaniards and mixed with white. I'm not talking about them. Look up an indigenous Mexican and see how much that guy looks just like an Eskimo. If he doesn't, you can call me whatever you want.
If I would like somebody,
you can disprove me right here. If that guy, but indigenous Mexican or Central American, don't look exactly like an Eskimo, call me out on it right now.
I would like somebody
darker versions of those people. They would tell you themselves, just like the Garifuna young lady we had on a little while ago. They would tell you themselves, Africans came over. They were trading with us. They were bringing whatever we needed. We mixed with them in our population, and now there's a population of darker versions of us because we mixed with the world's darkest people out of the dark continent, right? This is just
And
common sense.
I would like for somebody in the audience who's watching to tell me the name of that brother they collected on his paternal DNA. I think he was either from North Carolina or South Carolina. Do they have traced some of the oldest paternal DNA in Africa, in the world? And it was a brother in the United States that they were able to link him to this tribe in Africa that have that same identical genetic markers. Explain that, though. I need you to explain it. Okay? Now,
And even
the next thing I want to say,
somebody in the comments just
the
said
next thing I wanted
the
to
darkest
add.
people are in India. Great point. Great point. And this goes back to what I said a little while ago. In the migration of people out of Africa, you find that those who were in the closest distance out of Africa remain the darkest, especially if they didn't have to go through cold temperatures like those that travel through Siberia, or mixing with other races like those that mix with the Caucasian Caucasoids, right? So that's why the indigenous people in India are still dark black, because they migrated out of Africa, and way before that migration reached China and Siberia, those people settled in India. That's really, India is just outside of Africa, it's just on the other side of the Middle East. That's why some of the darkest people in the world are also in the United Arab Emirates. In the United Arab Emirates, in Dubai. Some of the darkest people you'll ever see in your life are Emirati. And I'm not talking about immigrants. I'm not talking about the people who immigrate to Dubai to work. I'm talking about Emirati. Real, actual Emiratis are dark. Why? Because they're closest to Africa in the migration. That's why Indians are dark. That's why Singaporeans, as you travel down through the Singapore-Malaysia corridor and you travel into Australia, that's why indigenous Australians are black. There was a land bridge. These things are provable by actual archaeology. There was a land bridge.
So I want to come in here and say something about them being dark. That doesn't matter, because the oldest people on the planet are not dark skinned, which is the Sangqua people in South Africa and Botswana. They are very light skinned people, but they are the oldest genetically. They are the oldest people on the planet. Okay, and they are not dark skinned. So I don't think dark skin makes you more African than somebody who is lighter skinned. I said it from the beginning that African people have varying phenotypes, because we have the most diversity. African people, period, have more genetic diversity than any other people on the planet.
Facts.
So we can go from light to dark. So dark don't mean more African. And another thing is, African people, according to scientists, are the only pure 100% human beings on the planet, because there were other humanoid, I call them humanoid, like the Neanderthal and a lot of other, and our people mixed with them. And I believe that's where you get these other races of people coming
definitely
from.
Where you get those other races of people from, for sure.
I don't subscribe to the idea that white people are just black people who turn white. I don't subscribe to that because then they would not have Neanderthal DNA. We don't have it, they have it. So it's something else going on with these other Asian type people that's causing them to have that white skin, okay? Because that is that's a recessive thing. White skin is a recessive thing, just like light colored eyes is recessive. Straight hair is recessive. And I suspect that they got that from their Neanderthal ancestry or something like that. Okay?
Of course.
So I just wanted to add that.
So we're gonna play another video really quickly. And this breakdown is one that even I didn't see until after this conversation came up, but it was brought to my attention. It's a very good explanation of these types of migrations. So, and we're, again, I just want to go on record because I know a lot of people are watching. A lot of people are going to watch this even after we go off the air, and they're going to say, oh, these guys are trying to steal our heritage from us. They're trying to make us something we're not. They're anti-American. I see people in the comments saying crazy stuff like that. No, that's not what this is. What this is We have lived and operated on both sides of the ocean. My sister Yaa and I, Brother Foday, who's just on here, we have a specific viewpoint that a very small percentage importance of what has happened on both sides. Okay, you cannot know this story in full with just one half of the story. And when I watch certain other YouTubers, people like Calloway and these kind of folks, I hear a very one-sided story. It always has a fall off point where it's like, okay, well, what else, right? You're only telling half of the story because you've only seen half of the story. And so we want to bring in alternative perspectives, not to tell you that you are not Native or Indigenous, not to tell you that you have not been in America before whites, not to tell you that you have heritage that goes back thousands of years, right? That's not what we're here to tell you. What we're here to tell you is, if at this point in time, you are a Black person, like myself, like my sister here, like the millions of us in America, chances are, and for far better chances than not, you have African ancestry that penetrated your bloodline along the way. That does not mean that your ancestors were slaves, because a lot of our ancestors were not. That does not mean that your ancestors, were even explorers with Mansa Musas, and then that's just an example of how it can happen. The only thing we're telling you is that somewhere in your history, your people migrate out of Africa. And so just to offer another perspective on that particular note, I'm going to drop a video. It is a video given by a Caucasian, but we're going to listen to this perspective because it offers very scientific, archaeological proof and data that can be used in this debate in order for us to better understand ourselves. All right? So tune in. We'll be right back.
Lock the doors, because what I'm about to say is going to upset some people right next here. Okay. Christopher Columbus did not discover America. Exactly. I mean, never mind the question of like how you can discover a place where the inhabitants are watching you arrive from the shore. They weren't wearing pants. Is that what somebody said? I like that. So anyway, there were actually many other mariners before Columbus that discovered America as well. Decades earlier, even eons earlier, there were so many people that were coming across these islands and this continent. But it's only been in the last century that evidence has surfaced and continually grown to indicate that many of these pre-Columbian explorers might have come from Africa. So the first scientist to promote this possibility was Leo Wiener. Born in Russia, Wiener immigrated to the United States in the late 19th century on his way to British Honduras, where he planned to open a vegetarian commune. Well, when that turned out not to be the dream job he expected, he moved back to the United States and he became a professor at Harvard University, as one does. But in his time in Mesoamerica, he started noticing things. There are lots of things that led him to encounter certain discoveries that made him consider that possibly if the origins of American civilization might actually be in Africa. So he observed so many linguistic and botanical and other similarities that between 1920 and 1922, he published an extensive 3-volume piece called Africa and the Discovery of America. Now, unfortunately, this is the 1920s, so as yet, no serious archaeological evidence had been done or work had been done to support his botanical theories, because everyone was over raiding tombs in Egypt and things like that. Nod to Howard Carter. So he didn't have a whole lot of other stuff than the names to support him. However, he knew that other clues must exist. For example, he pointed out that Columbus himself was aware that African mariners had preceded him. In his diary of his second voyage, Columbus tells of how the natives of Hispaniola actually had given him gold-tipped metal spearheads that they said were brought by black-skinned people who had come in large boats from the south and southeast. Coincidence? I think not. No. So what's interesting about that, so upon returning to Spain, is that he actually took the spearheads and he sent them away and they had them assayed, and it turned out to be that these spearheads were covered in this metal, this alloy that the inhabitants called guanin, and the metallurgists actually found out that this was an alloy of 32 parts. It was like 18 of gold, 6 of silver, 8 of copper, which, dun dun dun, matched the metal used in spearheads made in Western Africa for thousands of years, as carried by medieval African warriors, including the Mali and the Moors. The West Africans even called this metal guanin, the same name used by the natives of Hispaniola. But nothing more was said about that. Conspiracy. Well, probably because, in the interest of Spain, it was in their best interest that they didn't want to have any challenges to the discovery and the claims to the islands of the West Indies. Well, as the poem goes, or it should anyway, in 1493, Columbus stole all he could see. Yeah, so on his second voyage, which was 10 times larger than the first, Columbus went on a frantic but unsuccessful island hopping trip to find gold and spices. He carried along several natives from his newly discovered San Salvador, which the inhabitants called Guanahanvi. Another island that the natives pointed out was really large and was called Soameto. Soameto. Now, Columbus continued going around whimsically renaming every island he could find. But, Leo Wiener, being the curious person and the linguist that he was and the etymologist, he couldn't help noticing that the origin of these many place names and botanical names in Mesoamerica actually sounded distinctly like other languages in Africa, particularly Bantu and even Arabic. Wiener and numerous other botanists have also puzzled over the presence of certain plants that predated Columbus but originated in Africa. For example, the calabash bottle gourds. Now, this is a species originally from West Africa, where they were well cultivated in America before Europeans arrived, even long before they existed in Indonesia or Polynesia. So, in fact, the Pacific was the last place that bottle gourds actually reached and expanded to. Pardon my covfefe. Well, if it were not for transatlantic trade, pre-Columbian times, it would be very difficult to explain how certain plants, such as the yam, the sweet potato, domesticated cotton, peanuts, and tobacco, reached both West Africa and the Americas. The spread of the plantain is particularly noteworthy because it could not remain viable if it was carried in salt water. Well, in the 1640s, a Brazilian botanist named George Marcgrave. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Speaking of botany, Ricola. No, there we go. So thank you very much. So the Brazilian botanist George Marcgrave wrote that the establishment of a particular varieties of plantains in this region stands as a strong argument for ancient maritime contact between the Americas and Africa. That's bananas. B-A-B-A-N-A-S. That's right. Thank you. All right. Excuse me. All right. Yeah. Okay. So, how do these plants and languages that's going to be good. All right, use the cough drop. Okay, so how do these plants and languages and other cultural elements get to the Americas? Well, some believe, so what's that? Well, you're cheating. Well, some people believe that, over thousands of years, Africans migrated out of Africa and then over the Bering Strait, then down into South America, and things like that. Well, another explanation exists, and so get ready. There you go, let it out of your system. Awesome. Africans had ships. In fact, they had four kinds of, unbelievable. They had a shipload of vessels, and they had away. The anchors way. So, in fact, they had four kinds of vessels. And Nubian pottery, this is an example of Nubian pottery with a painting on it that shows a long-hold pottery. Art! That shows either a long-hold boat or a papyrus raft or a hulled-out canoe. And then this other painting beside it is from, the first one was from 3000 BC, and this is a bird's-eye view of an oared riverboat in Chad. And it dates from 3500 BCE. Now, the Africans of Guinea also had dugout canoes hewn from these monumental trees on the coast there. In 1500, just a few years after Columbus's voyage, the Portuguese captain Pacheco Pereira wrote, "In this country can be found the largest canoes made of a single trunk. Some are so large that they hold 80 men." Now, the West Africans were known to lash two dugout canoes together, side by side, and no one questions the seaworthiness of a similar type of Polynesian catamarans. Well, here's a 15th century Portuguese painting of sailing canoes on the Congo estuary. The Portuguese, like Captain Pereira, had heard that African traders were visiting Brazil in the mid-1400s. So to demonstrate that mariners from West Africa could have sailed to the Americas using papyrus vessels as early as 2000 BCE, Norwegian adventurer Thor Heyerdahl actually used ancient shipbuilding techniques in order to construct and sail the Ra 1 and the Ra 2 in 1969 and 70. And generally, some type of sailing vessel will average about 100 miles per day, even without sails. And in an ocean current, something like a raft or a reed boat can average about 60 miles a day. Now, Islamic historian Amir Hajib reported that voyages west from Mali were happening in the year 1311, just 150 years before Columbus. Now, when he asked the Mali emperor, shown here, incidentally, holding a globe of the world made of solid gold, asked him, well, tell me about this rumor about Atlantic travel. And he said that his predecessor had commissioned an expedition with 200 ships filled with men and a similar number with gold and water and enough provisions for 2 years. And he said, go out and find something. And if you don't come back, so you find something or you run out of food. And unfortunately, only one ship returned, and the captain told the emperor that we sailed for a very long time until we met what seemed like a river with a strong current flowing in the open sea. I was the last ship, and I turned where I was and did not enter the current. The others disappeared. I do not know what became of them. So, well, this story seems to describe the trade wind-driven equatorial current, or the Canary Current. Now, I apologize if anyone has any cats on their lap at the moment, but so we basically have two rivers, two circular rivers in the ocean here, and you can see it's very easy for Africans from the south and the Angola regions to come up towards the equator and going westwards, or from the western coast of Africa north of the equator to go eastwards along that same current. But you know, this Mercator projection doesn't really, in terms of cartography, boo Mercator, it really doesn't do it justice. So let me just, I did this little animation for you to show that they could have taken the Canary Current up and around, and then they go over they fall off the edge of the earth, and then they come back and they make landfall back again in Cape Verde. So it is definitely possible. So I definitely had to do that. Now, at least a dozen explorers, including Constantine Ravenous, reported seeing blacks upon reaching the New World. In fact, in 1513, Spanish explorer Vasco Núñez de Balboa, who you might know because people named a very popular dance after him, Anyway, so when Balboa was there, he said he met members of a tribe of Ethiopians in Panama. And according to Balboa's log, these men came from a totally black village that was 2 days' journey away. And he figured that these blacks had come from Ethiopia at a much earlier date. So there are also examples of physical evidence, including pre-Columbian African skeletons, which have been found throughout the Americas. Now, dating between 800 BCE and 300 CE, these murals are from the Temple of the Warriors at Chichen Itza. Now, they clearly feature, the color version is easier to see, but they clearly feature 3 races. And it's depicting black and Indian allies and a battle against white invaders. Now, because of their long blonde hair, hair jewelry, a skin-hulled boat that we have here, right there, and also the fact that they're fighting naked, which was common for warriors from Ireland, they believe that these are Celtic warriors. And because this mural shows that blacks are clearly fighting on the side of the Mayans, that they must have been integrated into society much longer before this painting was done in order to form that form of alliance. Now, there are numerous pre-Columbian figurines with striking similarities to ancient African artwork, and they've been found in Central and South America. In southeastern Mexico, there are 18 rock statues of heads up to 11 feet tall that are facing the ocean, looking east. Now, archaeologists call them the Olmec colossal heads, after the people that carved them. And they were produced for 50 to 200 years and date from at least 900 BCE, when they were mysteriously buried for some reason. So now think about it. It took enormous effort to quarry these. The smallest one was 6 tons, so 6 to 50-ton blocks, to quarry them and carry them 75 miles away from the quarry, and then carve them and then erect them. These people that they modeled them after must have been important. Whoever they were, they must have been important to be remembered or obeyed or worshipped. Well, Jose Meglia Serrano, the archaeologist who first uncovered them, he pointed out that facial features look amazingly like African blacks, and they all display distinctive headgear or protective helmets. Now, however, some people think that these are actually the facial figures of overweight babies. Yeah, I think they needed to wear helmets when they were babies, if they think that. So, yeah. And then still others find it easier to believe that instead of Africans, those depicted or responsible for these sculptures, and as well as the Mesoamerican pyramids, were not African Americans, but dun dun dun. So why is it that so many people have never heard of this alternative of American discovery by the continent's nearest neighbors to the east? So, I mean, look, now the thing, exactly, whoa, where'd all the continents go? So this is, look at how close this is. I mean, why people don't think that you could go, this is closer compared to more than twice the distance that Columbus sailed. This will win a drink for you in a bar game sometime. Which state is closest to Africa? Maine. Yeah, look. See there, you got to need a globe for this. Look at that. You know, versus, yeah, geometry. Science. There you go. So anyway, so very few Americans know this. And why is this? So having examined textbooks throughout for years up until 2018, James W. Lowen says that although some books cite the alternative possibility that Vikings, Norse, or even Irish may have reached America first, not one textbook, old or new, mentions the West Africans. So whether or not you give any credence to this admittedly controversial Afrocentric theory, it's obvious that Columbus was not the first to discover America, but the last. So why did he make such an indelible mark on Western people's minds? Well, conquest may have a lot to do with it. Right, Eurocentrism. Unlike the mundanity of perhaps thousands of years of peaceful African transatlantic trade, the quest for gold and world domination makes a much better story. And, the good Queen Isabella was so proud of her fella that She immediately equipped Columbus with 17 ships, 1,500 men, 200 cannons, crossbows, cavalry, and even 20 attack dogs for a second voyage. And another, and another. The story of Columbus remains the most widely accepted version of American discovery, most likely because it was the most recent, the most well-armed, the most documented, and the most similar in appearance to the authors of American textbooks. And one other thing that should be pointed out here is that in the years after Columbus discovered America, in 400 years, 20 million Africans were stripped from the coast of Africa, half of them dying in transit for slavery, who knows how many fleeing inland. And at the same time, within 5 years of Columbus's arrival in the New World, 90% of the indigenous population had died from disease or murder, 90%. So the fact is that leaves few people to have a written or memory or an oral history of the seafaring of their African discoverers. Historian Samuel D. Marble wrote, "As a subject for research, the possibility of African discovery of America has never been a tempting one for American historians. We choose our own history, or more accurately, we select those vistas of history that more or less kind of explain to have the promise of the greatest satisfaction for ourselves. And we have had little appetite to explore the possibility that our founding father was a black man." So nevertheless, there is considerable evidence to suggest that African mariners also participated in this great adventure, no less than Vikings, the Portuguese, Spaniards, Celts, Chinese, Polynesians, and Arabs, and others. So now I would like to raise a toast to all the discoverers of America before Columbus, wherever you may came from. May more of us discover you. Thank you.